are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And make sure you subscribe to all podcasts, this podcast on all platforms, and then also make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Today, I've got Larry Blustien, legendary South Florida reporter, to talk a little bit of Miami Hurricanes football with us today. Usually we do it on a Monday, and we call these Blu Mondays, and it's certainly blue outside with Hurricane Milton approaching us. But, you know, blue from the marathon of a game on Saturday night between Miami and Cal, I felt like I needed another day to kind of recover here. So we're here on a Tuesday here with my guy, Blustien. Thanks for joining me today, Larry.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. First of all, I'd just like to say that our prayers and our best for the people who are going to be in the affected areas in Tampa Bay. And obviously there's a lot of people that we know, from, from covering the state of Florida, and coaches and players and families. And I've kind of conveyed that to them, calling them, and a lot of people who live close to the coastline are taking this extremely serious, as they should. But our prayers are definitely going to be and watching over them over the next 3 days.
Definitely our thoughts and prayers are with everyone on the west coast of Florida. But there was a hurricane brewing over there on the west coast as well, up there in North Cal, where Miami pulled out an amazing comeback, 39-38. I counted them out, Blue. When it was 35-10, I certainly kind of counted this team out. I didn't think they had it in them to pull this one out, but Cam Ward brings this team back once again in back-to-back weeks. You saw the game, Blue. Just your take on the comeback win over Cal on Saturday night.
Yeah, well, two things. I don't think there was even a most ardent Cane fan that thought Miami could win that game when they were down by 25 with less than 8 minutes left in the game. I mean, it's just, if you did, then either you're lying or you are just a blind fan. I mean, because there was just no way. I mean, they didn't play very well. The other, Cal was very motivated for the game. I stayed up. I watched, and I was just saying to you off air, 35-10 game. And I got to admit, I was up for like 17, 18 hours during the day doing other things. And I was, my eyes were closing. I could say that. And then when Miami scored, I said, well, wait a minute, there's a few minutes. Let's see what happens. And you know how, like, sometimes you'll say, well, I'm going to see how things go on the next drive. So I watched Cal. They didn't go 3 and out, but I think they went 5. And then they had a punt, and then Miami scored. And I said, wait a minute, now there's 5 minutes left, and now they're only down by 2 scores. So you never know what's going to happen here. So I stuck with it. And, somewhere around 2:15 in the morning, watching, and I go, oh man, this is crazy, but then you figure out 2 weeks in a row, they pulled that rabbit out of the proverbial hat. And, can this last? Can the defense is certainly going to have to step up sometime and stop some of these drives and not allow, the 400 yards on the other side of the ball, even though Miami's scoring, you can't rely on that, especially. And I just said to you, you look at the schedule, and Florida State included, because it's a rivalry game. Every game is going to be close. Wake Forest has played extremely well. We know Louisville is going to be a huge obstacle, along the way. We know the Syracuse down the road, has played. So this is something that in this off week that Miami's going to have to start concentrating on and watching the film and see what went south. Why are we playing any different? And the opponents, Marcus, are much better, than Ball State and Florida A&M and even Florida for that matter. But you have to see what's happening, because offensively, you thought your offensive line was probably the bright spot coming into the into the season. And now they even become a little bit vulnerable, and having, somebody like a Cam Ward having to do so much freelance work. And on the defensive side of the ball, you knew that the secondary would be a problem, but what has happened, especially in the last couple of games, the defense isn't getting, especially the line isn't getting the rush that it had early on in the season. And I know the opponent was lesser then, and the linebacking play for the most part has been exposed. Mawanoa hasn't played anywhere near what he played last year. He made a couple of key plays. Having Reuben Bain was just a big plus. He came up with 2 sacks when they needed it the most, but yeah, I mean, there's a little soul searching, but I think that this week off came at just the perfect time, because you're 6-0, you're rated within the top 10 in the nation. You're poised to really, put things together. If you get past Louisville, then, you got Florida State and you got games but are there any games that you could look at and say, well, we're going to score 50, 60 points and they're not going to score? Probably not. But that's what ACC football is about. This is a better conference than people think. You look at Clemson, they're exceeding expectations by a lot of people. I think you take a look at a Virginia Tech team, and I said after the game that I don't think Virginia Tech's going to lose that much anymore. They're just too good of a football team. How they lost to Rutgers and how they lost early on, is kind of like surprising. But then again, you look at Alabama, losing to Vanderbilt. And that's the one thing you heard during the game, and that kind of made me laugh when the Cal fans were saying overrated. But then what is Alabama then? I mean, at least Miami was in a battle with a team that is, shown so far and winning 3 games in their ACC opener here at home, that they can play. So you're going to find that every week. I mean, Louisville is going to be a test. We know, like I said, Florida State may come in 1-6, but you know what? They're still a rival, and that's a huge recruiting game.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Virginia Tech. That loss to Vanderbilt earlier in the season looks a lot better now. Now that they've beaten the mighty Alabama Crimson Tide. Even that loss to Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers is a solid team as well. They only lost to that team by 3. So I agree with you. This conference is underrated. It's always underrated, though. It's always underrated every year. It's always deemed the least of the Power 4 now conferences. So yeah, I agree. I had that takeaway as well at the end of the Cal game. I was like, wow, so every game is going to be tough. Every game is going to be a battle to the end here. And that 6-0 is, I think, is a legitimate 6-0. But
yeah.
If you ask others around the nation, though, Blue, they think this team is flawed because obviously they were a bit lucky, I guess you could say, to win these last 2 games. But at the same time, they earned those victories. I mean, they earned those comeback victories. Sure. And they battled and they showed adversity. They showed that they could deal with adversity, and they showed resiliency. So now that this team is 6-0, we're halfway through the season here. Do you think that the refs, I guess, have been playing a part in Miami being 6-0? Are they being lucky, or is Miami really that good?
Well, you know what? I don't get that, everybody gets calls. And when you're under a microscope, especially in these days, anything that's called against a team adverse or any team is called positive, everyone's going to, well, the officials. Miami hasn't been relevant in 22 years. So who's going to care, if they win or lose? And most people don't care. So that's why I'm saying, if you're a California fan, you're going to look at a couple of calls and say, well, you know what, the referees wanted Miami to win. But then you look at Cal, there were 3 plays there. There were 2 holdings that could have easily been called on a couple of plays that got first downs. And then even the runners stepped out at around the 11 and they never called it. So, I mean, you could go either way on that. Sure. I think Miami, they're legit for what they're doing. I mean, you're going to say that about, Ole Miss losing. You're going to say that about Tennessee losing. I mean, are they flawed? I mean, it's just, I just think that in this day and age right now, Oklahoma and Texas and Ohio State are two teams that have kind of separated themselves from the pack, but they haven't either, other than the Texas-Michigan game, because Michigan lost to Washington, who's much depleted, and Jed Fish is trying to put that thing back together. So who really has a statement game yet? None of those big teams have had statement games. And even Oregon is kind of a shaky thing. But Boise State ran for 415 yards on them. So that's what I'm saying. Who's to say that any win is, you're lucky to win that game? No, everybody's lucky to win a game. I mean, it's just that in this day and age of the portal and everything's so evened out now. I mean, there's talent everywhere, like even you take a look at Vandy. And I've always said this about Vanderbilt. I said, you know what? If I was a student athlete, that would be the school to go to, because you're playing undoubtedly the toughest schedule in the country, because you're lining up against all those powers in the SEC basically every week. And of all the programs in the SEC, they're in by far the largest community city. I mean, Nashville's huge. So, that's why I said everybody has a selling point to their program. And I think with Miami, and I've said in our Six Ring Canes podcast on Monday night, I said, listen, this is what it is. Miami has an opportunity now to do a lot of positive things because they're recruiting well. You see, Florida State, the reason why they've dropped off is they banked on, the Colemans and then the Travises and all those guys and a couple of other portal kids that did really well, but they didn't recruit real well. So right now they're getting exposed that none of those kids are pushing. But at Miami, O.J. Frederick from day one, Lyles from day one, guys like that are now getting in. The kids that they've recruited over the last couple of years, Mawanoas, all these guys that, even Rivers from back in the day, they're all making a huge impact. So they're not relying. Yeah, it's nice to have, Barron and those kids up front and, having a guy like Cam Ward and, getting somebody, like a Martinez. It's great. But you're infusing them in rather than just relying on them, because you have all those young kids pushing for playing time. Look at Ray. Ray can't even get on the field half the time, and he'd probably start for 80%. Look at Brashard Smith. I mean, here's a guy that tried to push himself in. Now he's the key running back for SMU, a really good SMU team. So, I'm not going to buy into the fact that Miami's lucky no, they're playing. I mean, they're just playing good football, and sometimes the better teams come out on top.
Yeah, Miami certainly did come out on top on Saturday, and a lot of it had to do with the brilliance of Cam Ward. I mean, this guy is just definitely one of the best college football players in the country. He's exciting just to watch if you're just a football fan. He is a gunslinger, though. He's a guy who is going to take risks, and I kind of like that about him. I kind of like the fact that he's not afraid to, chuck it deep or try to extend plays or come up with some crazy shovel pass to a back in the flat or a tight end to try to get a first down. I definitely like that about Cam Ward, but sometimes it can be detrimental because we kind of saw that in the first half against Cal and some of the third quarter as well, where he put his team in harm's way. I mean, against Virginia Tech, he had 3 turnovers. In the last 2 games, he's had 4 total turnovers and 6 touchdowns, 6 touchdown passes to go along with 2 rushing touchdowns. He's completed 68% of his passes in these last 2 games and passed for a total of 880 yards, which is just a mammoth number. My question to you, Blue, is many want to know, is this team legit? I think a lot of the experts around the country, including myself, still feel like this team can win the ACC. But is that as far as this team can go? And can Cam Ward's play the way that he plays, which is kind of a gunslinger mentality, a little Brett Favre in him, is that something that you can see that can take this team all the way to a national championship?
Yeah. I don't think that they have a national championship team. They have a really good team that is capable of knocking heads and maybe winning the ACC, which would be great. It took you all the way to November 17th to win your 6th game last year. And look at where you're at now. You're bowl eligible after 6 weeks. I think there's a tendency for a lot of people, for fans, and for a lot of other people to think, well, Miami is this and that. You just can't go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. I mean, Miami's done a great job, and to be 6-0 is certainly a testament to, as you said, to a Cam Ward or a big play here and there. And everybody, I don't care who it is, Alabama or Ohio State's going to see a couple of games where they're going to have to struggle a little bit. It's just how it is, I mean, it's just, I think what Miami's doing is extremely well. They're playing extremely well, but to start anointing them a national championship team is it's amusing because of the fact that they're really not. I mean, they've put everything together. I just think that right now Louisville is paramount to win that game. You go 7-0, and then you put yourself in a position where mostly, other than the Syracuse game, every other game is winnable and at home. So, I mean, I could play to the Hurricane fans and say, oh, Miami's like this, they're the best, but they're not. You know that. I mean, they're not deep enough at a lot of places. They're making a lot of mistakes. But to Cam Ward's credit, after the game, Marcus, and in the post-game press conference, because I got it played back. I didn't watch it live, but he even said he's got to cut down on that. I mean, he said, I know I'm making big plays and we're winning, but that string's gonna run out. I got to play more soundly. I've got to play within myself a little bit more, not force things in. And I think that he's going to sit down in this off week, and certainly, he and Coach Dawson are going to go over some things and say, hey, listen, why did I throw that ball? What did I see? They'll break down film and they'll look and say, what did I see? Am I just thinking that everything that I'm going to do is going to work? And it hasn't. But like you alluded to, I mean, 853 games at 853 yards at 2 games. Some people are happy to get 1,500 yards in a season. He's pretty much, after 6 games, over 2,000 yards. And, right. But, there's other facets. I mean, Martinez, he's starting to play the way they need him to play. He's not a marquee back. And I don't care what he did at Oregon State. He's just not a marquee back. He's a functional back. Reminds me of Javaris James back in the day, where, he'll get you some yards from the line of scrimmage, but where he's lethal is coming out of the backfield. And he's going to pair himself against a linebacker or go up against a corner who's 158 pounds, so they're finding out now about a lot of kids who help them. They understand that their tight ends work. They've got 3 of them. I mean, all 3 of them had an opportunity in the game to do some things. And then you got some receivers. I mean, that was a question mark at the beginning of the year. But now with the addition of Brown and guys like that who are, playing extremely well and making big catches when they need to. And then you got Restrepo. Everybody thinks that, Restrepo's a gimmick. He's not a gimmick. I mean, they're putting some of their best people on him. He's just a great route runner, and he does things without the ball that makes him very, very, very good. On defense, the secondary's still a question mark. They've got individuals that make plays, but if the linebacker play, which I don't think is as good as they thought it was going to be, doesn't improve, you're going to be in a situation where your front 4 can't do everything. Every play, your linebackers are going to have to fill in those intermediate passes that Mendoza threw the other day were in linebacker areas. So, they have to learn how to drop a little bit more. But you know what? I could be sitting here and dissecting any team in the country like this because I don't think anybody's head and shoulders. But the one thing I do know is Miami's setting the future. They're setting for the future because, you're going to add additional pieces every year from the portal or whatever. But the very fact that you look at their recruits and guys that are getting into the game now and getting a lot of experience, kids that, you say to yourself, you know what, maybe we don't need to go in the portal for this position, because what it does is right now at the defensive line, you have 3 of the 4 guys that came out of the portal, but all that's doing, I mean, you got Massador, who was 2 years ago in that same situation. But that's how you have to build a program in this day. And, people don't realize, I mean, a team could get real good over a year. Look at Miami. They were struggling to be a 500 team last year, and now they're 6-0. So everything's relative, but I will say, as your original question, whether I thought that they have a chance to win the national championship, to be honest, I don't think they do. I just don't think that they have enough. They can't keep pulling, a cat out of the bag and late going against stellar teams and teams that have really good defenses. So, but to do what they're doing, and you take one game at a time, just to get into the playoffs, would be just such a. I saw that they had them paired against Notre Dame in the first round of this playoff. It would end today. They would be a 7. Notre Dame would be a 10. I mean, it's whatever it is, but isn't that exciting to be playing? An additional game. I mean, when everybody was looking at the program the last couple of years and wanted to get Mario out of town, and I mean, but he's done. He's done. Marcus, exactly what he says. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. He came into town, and I said this over and over again. He probably inherited the worst up and down roster that Miami's ever had, ever. And it was so depleted of talent. There was no depth whatsoever. And he's made 68 roster changes in 2 years. And that's added up to where we're at now.
What I would argue, Blue, is that this college football season is kind of unpredictable, and there's no clear-cut great team to me. If I would say that there's a really good team, to me, if I had to guess who's going to win the national championship this year, I'd probably say Texas, just because they seem to have a lot of talent. They've got 2 legitimate quarterbacks that could probably carry them through games. So, yeah, I agree with you that this team doesn't feel like it's a national championship team, but who does?
Yeah.
No one really does feel like a national championship team. Ohio State, to me, is yet to prove how good they are. Let's see what they do against Oregon this week. If they blow the doors off of them, I think they become the top team in the nation, or the team to beat. But as of right now, I think Miami has a chance as long as Cam Ward is under center. I think if you got the quarterback, then you got a chance, because Miami gave up tons of big plays against Cal. And somehow they were still able to come back in that game and win. And I think that's a lot of credit to Cam Ward. And I think if he just kind of limits the turnovers and continues to improve in efficiency, then I don't see how Miami doesn't have a chance. Do I think that they'll go undefeated? Probably not. Do I think they'll win the national championship? Probably not. There's a chance that they won't win the ACC, but I think there is a possibility that they could, just because you just never know with college football. Vandy beat Bama last week, Blue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like one of the weirdest upsets ever in college football history. So I think anything can happen. But hey, Miami's in the bye week, and the bye week, Blue, has really kind of bitten Miami in these past few years. They usually lose after bye weeks, and it's really just it's kind of baffling, because you have an extra week to prepare, and they will have an extra week to prepare against Louisville, who does play Virginia this week, and they have lost now 2 games in a row. They lost to Notre Dame, and then they now lost to SMU. Both 1-score games, but still, a loss is a loss. They're kind of reeling a little bit, and I'm sure they're looking to bounce back against a Virginia team that I believe beat Boston College last week. So it just shows you how deep this conference really is. But to look ahead against Louisville, I think some, including myself, think that this is probably the toughest game of the season for the Hurricanes, just because, you're going in a tough environment against a team that is loaded with a bunch of Miami, South Florida guys. I mean, you and I can go down the list of all the players from South Florida that play for Louisville, that are looking to show the hometown and the hometown team that, hey, maybe they should have gone after them or kept them or whatnot. You got Don Chaney, you got Ja'Cory Brooks, you got Kataris Hicks, Stanquan Clark. There's just a bunch of players.
Isaac Brown, who's
Isaac Brown.
big time kid.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a ton of players, I think, that will be playing with a chip on their shoulder. So just to look ahead at that game, Blue, how do you think Miami fares against Louisville in over a week?
Yeah, that's that's a loaded question. They got to come out and they've got to have a game plan that they've got to play 4 quarters. Understand that Louisville's going to make their plays, but at the same time, Miami has to limit those big plays. I mean, they run the ball well. Braum might be as good an offensive mind as anybody in the country. And so he has a lot of avenues that are going to attack Miami's defense, the deficiencies. He's going to throw underneath a lot. He's going to test the corners a lot. They're going to throw a middle. They can throw bubble screens that are going to, Mauanoa, I think, needs to get. I mean, I know he made a couple of plays, but I think he and Wesley Bassint, I think we expected a lot more out of them so far this year. And they really haven't. In the bigger games, the last 2 games, have come up with those plays that really, that really define themselves. And I think that's what's going to happen in that game. From the offensive standpoint, I think Miami can score on basically anybody, especially as you mentioned with Ward. The defense bothers me because of the fact that there are a lot of deficiencies and there's a lot of point. If you're a good offensive coordinator, you could pretty much pick out a lot of things so they're going to score. So Miami just needs to, at least limit those big plays, those chunk plays, and make them beat them, on the ground. And, and then, like you said, Isaac Brown can run, Chaney can run, I mean, so it stacks up to be a really, really tough matchup again, like I said, but I figured even if FSU the following week hobbles into the Hard Rock at 1-6, there's still going to be a good fight because there's a lot of pride at stake. There's a lot of, there's going to be probably a record number of recruits. I don't know what time the game's going to start. I would hope that would, I think maybe the networks will be a little gun shy to put it in a prime time because Florida State, only having 1 win.
Right.
But I think if they reevaluate and understand this is a rivalry. And you had mentioned Texas. Well, Texas got Oklahoma this week. So, and that's never a given either. So, and those are 2 rivalry teams that you literally throw out the records because both of them have dudes. So anything can happen. But I agree with you. Texas right now is head and shoulders, above the competition because of the fact that they're, that Sark has built a really good program. He's utilizing a lot of Texas kids. But that's the thing. When Oklahoma comes to town, Oklahoma has almost as many Texas kids on their roster as they do. So,
right.
You don't, excuse me, you don't, and then obviously you said that Oregon plays Ohio State. I'm not a big Oregon believer. I've watched them a few times. They've got a lot of deficiencies. Their offensive line isn't as good as it used to be. They're giving up points. The kid Genty ran for 263 yards on them.
Yeah, that kid's a beast.
So there's all these different things, Marcus, that can play out. But I think we just have to concentrate on this bye week. Get a couple people healthy, but at the same time, utilize it, to guard against what's happened the last couple of weeks. And, Miami doesn't need, they already shown the capability that they can come from behind, but sooner or later that's going to run out.
Right. Exactly. Miami needs to start fast against Louisville because they cannot afford to fall behind against the Cardinals in Louisville.
Yeah. Being a noon game is almost a blessing for Miami because it kind of takes that, craziness, those college crazy kids out of a 3:30 or a 7 o'clock game because most of them stay up late and they're not going to be able to, party out at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning as much as they would throughout the course of a day. So, but look at the fans. Look at the fans at Cal. I mean, you get those guys, most of them don't care about football. They just care about partying and, demonstrating. So, it is.
Yeah. I was actually very happy to see that it's a noon kickoff as well. We've been getting late games, so nice to see a noon kickoff to kick off not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Larry Blustien once again joining me here on the Storm Tracker podcast. It was another great episode, Larry. We'll connect again. Maybe another month from now. Maybe Miami is 10-0 by that point. Who knows? We'll see. Anything could happen. But Miami definitely off to one of their best starts in program history. Obviously, best start since 2017. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you follow this podcast here on this YouTube channel, live from Kings County, and also make sure you follow this podcast on all platforms as well. Most importantly, subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.